What's up, everybody, and welcome to ESO Daily. I am your host, Mr. Craven. Okay, so the regular servers are down, so I got on the PTS here just to go over the Warden tank options and skills today. Because I am currently working on my Warden tank on the PC. And on the PS4, when it releases next week, I will be working on my Warden Healer build, which I already know which direction I'm going on both. But I wanted to get on here and give you guys the breakdown of the Warden tank and how it applies and what you can and what you can do with the Warden tank options and builds. Okay, so the first thing I want to go ahead and do, now I'm a red guard. This gives me a lot of flexibility later on in my regular account if I ever want to switch from DPS. But for race options, what's really nice is you can go with the Nord, you can go with Orc, you can go with Argonian, which makes it really nice. Red Guard's really nice also for the tank option because the light attacks will help regen. Plus you can go stamina, but or you can even go with Magicka base because a lot of the Warden skill base has Magicka abilities. So this gives a lot more flexibility to. So say if you want more health regens and stuff, Nord and Orc has its strengths in those pulls. If you want a little bit more Magicka, you can go with Magicka class base ability like Brenton, High Elf, pretty much any class. The only class I would probably not make the Warden tank is the Khajiit, potentially, depending on what set you're going to go. Now, it does have flexibility with the crit if you're going to run a hybrid type build. So any race can do Warden tank. It's just which direction do you want to take the Warden tank becomes the most important question. But I'm going to go ahead. We're going to allot a couple points. Now, I'm a tank. And when I first started tanks, a lot of people were like, oh, that's too much health. And let me tell you guys something. There's no such thing. Resource management becomes an important factor, but a lot of mitigating effects that in this game scales off of your max health. So if anybody ever tells you it's too much health, they're crazy. But to me, a tank can have too little health because they're not mitigating that much damage because of the abilities. And you can get a lot of squishy tanks. And in the past, that's been the problem with a lot of tank builds. Just too squishy. Now, if they were more Magicka based, they could have more self-sustains, and that worked out well for them. But, you know, it's a very precarious type, finicky build options on tanks. But in this video, like I said, I just want to go over your options. But I always dedicate usually 70% into my health, and then I usually split the difference. But since I'm red guard, I'm going to have a lot of stamina, and I know that a lot of the base abilities from Warden are going to be Magicka based. So I'm going to put in more into the Magicka end. Now, usually I could split it, and I probably would do that. But since I already know I'm going to get a lot of stamina, and I just need stamina for taunt and block, I'm going to only put 8 points in my stam. All right? Now, that's me personally. You don't have to do that, but that's me personally. Okay, now, next thing I want to go ahead and do is always make sure all your passives are unlocked. It's a very important, guys. We want to get all those class out of the way. In assault, we're always going to grab the war horn. All right, that's very, very important. Undaunted, we will always want to try to get the undaunted medal. Now, on this one, I'm actually going to unlock inner light. I might not run it, but I still want to unlock it. That gives me max Magicka if needed. Once again, I'm going to hit all these passives in the heavy armor. Medium, I always take the recoveries if on my tanks. Those are always my focal point. And I also go for the reduction for light and the spell resist. Even if it's one piece, that does come in handy. Alright. One-handed shield. I'm going to unlock all the passives. I'm going to unlock all the passives, and then we'll go throughout all the skills. Oh. Okay. Alright, there we go. First thing I want to go ahead and do, I'm a tank. So you guys kind of know where I'm going with this. I'm going to go to Sword and Board. Now the first skill I'm going to take a look at is Puncture. Thrust your weapon with a disciplined precision at an enemy, dealing 804 physical damage and taunting them to attack you for 15 seconds. Also afflicts the enemy with major fracture, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280 for 12 seconds. Now, this is going to be usually your primary taunt, the reason being you get the major fracture. But here's the deal, guys. When we take a look at the morphs, we can go with the Ransacked, which also gains minor resolve, increasing your physical resistance. Depending on a lot of builds, you may need Ransack, but a lot of the times as a tank, you have enough physical resistance. So Pierce Armor becomes the better option. Why? Because it also gives Major Breach, reducing their spell resistance. So this is very important for your Magicka DPS to get a lot more penetration. So I usually opt for the Piercing Armor, but if you need more resistance, then go with Ransack. Low Slash. I love Low Slash because what it does is surprise an enemy with a deep lunge, dealing 879 physical damage and reducing their movement speed by 60% for 12 seconds. But what it really benefits the tank is it also gives the enemy minor maim, reducing their damage done by 15% for 12 seconds. This becomes very important, especially depending on how much health you have and what type of healer you're rolling with. And usually in a lot of pugs, that damage reduction comes in handy. Now, for the morphs, we have Deep Slash. Hits up to 2 additional targets near the enemy, which is okay, but what I really opt for usually is the Heroic Slash. You gain minor heroism, increasing your ultimate generation. That is a really nice boost because it grants me 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds per 9 seconds. That stacks up. Defensive Posture. Bolster your defense, reflecting the next skill projectile cast at you back to the enemy. While you have a shield equipped and this ability slotted, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 8%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by 8%. So I like the option. It depends on what I'm doing, whether or not I'll slot this. But the more for defensive stance, the reflected spell projectile also stuns the enemy. It's kind of nice for PvP, believe it or not. For PvP, that comes in so handy. But on PvE, I usually take the Absorb magic. This way I can get the heal. So anytime I absorb the spell projectile, I heal myself instead of reflecting it. For now, so it depends. If you're PvPing, the one morph's better, but for PvE, I'll take Absorb. Shield Charge. Rush an enemy and ram them, dealing 754 physical damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. This actually works in PvE with a certain set that when you do a charge, it taunts. And it comes in handy if you roll with that set. But most of the time you don't use it for PvE unless there's a certain mechanic that you got to use a gap close like Incredible Shadows. And it comes in handy. So Shield Charge Incredible Shadows definitely has a place. So I usually take it regardless. But in PvP, especially in Battlegrounds, this is becoming more relative. This ability is definitely for tank builds. Unless you have a gap closer that has some sort of CC, this is a pain in my ass most of the time. So also the morphs, Shield Assault. Gain a damage shield after the attack. Yeah. Okay. Need I say more? Invasion stuns longer based on the distance traveled, and that's kind of nice. So these are really, this is good for PvE and PvP, and I would take this more for PvP. So we'll take the shield assault. Power bash: strike an enemy full force with your shield, dealing 501 physical damage and stunning them for 3 seconds. Now keep in mind, guys, that if you're in PvP and you hit with the same type of CC, they have a CC immunity for a few seconds. So running 2 stuns never works. But if you have a different gap closer and you want to take power bash, it definitely comes in handy. PvE, not so much. So in the morphs, also afflicts the enemy with major defile, reducing their healing received. This is the biggest one for Battlegrounds at the moment, is debuffing your target. If you want to debuff them, if it's a healer and you know they're a healer, you hit them with this, it definitely comes in handy a lot. Power slam deals significantly increased damage, but no longer stuns. Blocking any attack increases the damage even further. But usually, I would take this for PvP, and I wouldn't. I mean, PvE, none of this really applies. So. But also, let's go over the ultimate. Shield Wall. Reinforce your shield, allowing you to automatically block all attacks at no cost for 6 seconds. This is actually a pretty badass ultimate for a tank. Spell Wall. You also reflect all projectiles cast at you and Shield Discipline. Your one hand and shield abilities cost are reduced while active. I actually like this one better, the Shield Discipline, if I run it. The reason being is because if you're with this new meta, and I hate using the word, but with this new meta, reserving your cost means so much more. So if you're going to use this ultimate in PvE, take the Shield Discipline. But in Trials, you always blow Warhorn. Maybe on mobs you can get a quick off, but the 100 cost is definitely really nice, guys. Okay, so there's pretty much the one-handed shield abilities. Now we're going to look at the Winter Embrace skills, right? Because this is primarily where all the tanking abilities come from. So the ultimate we have is Sleet Storm. Twist a violent storm around you, causing nearby enemies to take 568 frost damage every second for 8 seconds, and have their movement speed reduced by 70%. Nearby allies gain major protection, reducing incoming damage by 30%. The morphs we have is Northern Storm, increase max magicka while slotted, and then we have Permafrost, damaging nearby enemies will stun them. So here's the deal. For PvP, Permafrost comes in handy, and for dungeons, I've noticed it definitely helps, and it really works out nice if you're running CC, if you're running a CC type ability on general mobs. But for bosses, it doesn't come in handy because they're immune to it. Northern Storm, though, increasing the max magicka, works on both ends. You can run it on a DPS, or you can go ahead and run it up for the max magicka. So we're going to go with the Northern Storm. Frost Cloak. Wrap a thick cloak of ice around you and nearby allies. Affected targets gain major resolve, increasing physical resistance by 5,280, and major ward, increasing spell resistance by 5,280 for 21 seconds. This is a great ability. I love this for the Warden tank. Even Warden healer, it's nice. So, but if you're running a Warden tank and you have a Warden healer, the Warden healer wouldn't need this. But for the tank, it's the primary. So you could replace it and put another ability if you're a Warden healer. Because if it also applies to your DPS, which saves your ass as a healer. And for tank, the mitigating effects is just a necessity. The morphs. Expansive Frost Cloak. Reduce cost in a larger radius. Or Ice Fortress. Caster gains minor protection. Okay, this to me is kind of a toss-up because both of these work so well. Cost reduction is very important, but it's like 800, or the Ice Fortress with the minor protection, reducing. Yeah, I mean it's all going to be based on your gear. So if you have a lot of resistance, I would say go with the reduction. If you don't have a lot of resistance, go with the Fortress. So that's how I would play that one out. Impaling Shards. Skewer enemies with icy shards, dealing 288 frost damage in the area every second over 12 seconds and reducing movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. Damage done is based on your max health. Okay, once again, guys, this is why it pays to be a tank. Max health. Okay, now we do have the morphs. Immobilizes enemies or summons a target location instead of around you. Damage scales on max magicka and spell damage instead. Now this is good for the DPS, right? I really wish they would have kind of amped it up a little bit more for the DPS, but it definitely comes in handy. But obviously, since we're a tank, we want, the immobilization. Arctic Wind, envelop yourself in Winter's Wind, healing for 10% of what? Max health. Instantly, an additional 2% health every 2 seconds over 10 seconds. Okay? It's a really nice ability, guys. Polar Wind heals a nearby ally, or Arctic Blast deals frost damage to nearby enemies. Okay, for DPS, Arctic Blast makes sense, right? No doubt. Because it's 576, that definitely comes in handy. But I'm a tank, so guess what I'm going to do? Typically, I'm going to roll with the Polar Wind, because that's going to give a little bit sustain to my party members. Okay, Crystallized Shield. Spin a shield of ice around you to absorb projectiles. Each absorb restores 578 magicka. Shield breaks after 3 projectiles. This is really nice. So you can get up to almost 1,800 of magicka return on this. But for the cost for 27, But, it's nice. You can be able to restore, shoot projectiles at attackers or gain ultimate on successful absorption. This, to me, is the better option because I go ahead and now I gain major heroism. Remember, with the one ability, I have minor. This one's going to give me major. So I'm going to take the Shimmering Shield every day of the week. Frozen Gate. This ability is going to have its placement in times and stuff, because what it does is it summons an ancient portal. An enemy that runs over it is teleported to you and rooted for 3 seconds. You can only have one portal up at a time, and it is removed upon activation. Okay, so before I get into morphs, let me explain this. Bosses are immune to this, as far as I know, as far as I'm aware, but ads aren't. So basically, you can set a portal in that location where ads are going to spawn. Go back to the tank. They'll come to your location, right? So it makes it a really nice ability in those case scenarios. PvP, it even works out nicer because basically you kind of can use it like a booby trap, especially for like stam DPS. You can set it like this in a certain location where players are just not paying attention. They run over it, they teleport to you, and next thing you know, you're just having a field day busting their asses as they're running through the gate. So it's crazy, but it works. Alright, so Frozen Device. Enemies deal reduced damage. That is really nice. And Frozen Retreat. And this is kind of a heads up call too, because grants allies in the area a synergy that moves them to you. So as an off tank, Frozen Retreat works out a lot better. You can put it down and off tank, and then all of a sudden, if they get sucked up into a mechanic, that your gate's there, they hit the synergy, pop. They hit to you. That synergy is also going to help restore a percentage of their max stats. So this works out really nice. Frozen Device. If you're a primary tank going to be doing all the heavy load, I would opt for the Frozen Device. And on the off tank, do the other one. But that's me. Okay, now we're going to go into some abilities here. Most of the time we have Feral Guardian. That's not going to apply to us unless we're running some hybrid build. Dive, once again, it's not really going to apply. Scorch, nope. Swarm, nope. But guess what? Betty Netch. This little thing is so versatile in so many builds. It is crazy. Because what it does is it calls a Betty Netch that restores 3,555 magicka over 22 seconds. Now notice there's no magicka cost, guys. This is why it's important. Also gains major surgery, increasing spell damage by 20% over 24 seconds. It doesn't have a cost. And you're getting magicka back. And in this meta, you want resource management. So this little thing for the Warden plays an important role because you can either go with the Blue Betty, which also removes a negative effect, or you can go with the Bull, which restores stamina and grants major brutality. Now this is the toss-up. Do I need stamina or do I need magicka? But either way, you know, and major brutality. Now, to me, this is a buff. It's not a builder. A builder usually is an ability that will deal percentage of damage and then give you a secondary effect, increasing your next damaging effect. But this will also apply a buff. So a buff is an effect without any damaging properties. But a builder has a damaging property that will apply another buff. That's what a builder is, if anybody wants to know. But this buff is really nice for major brutality or major sorcery. But I think I'm going to go with the Blue Betty instead, because I'm a red guard. I know I already got that. Now, I also want to take a look at green balance. The major reason I at least want one skill in green balance here, right, is, let me see here. Where is it? Okay, when healing an ally with a green balance ability, gain 250 magic or 250 stamina, restoring at your lowest point. This is really good right here, guys, as far as helping mitigate if needed. Also, when healing you or an ally, grants them minor toughness, which increases max health by 10% for 10 seconds. This, to me, if you're going to ever be needing it, it comes in handy. And the one ability, even if you just use it on a whim, is fungal growth. And the reason being, guess what? It has a stamina morph to it. So I'll usually just take this on those certain occasions, just if necessary. But most of the time I don't slot it on a tank. But if you need it, it definitely comes in handy. Also, you could take Lotus Flower, embrace the Lotus Blessing, causing light attacks to restore 1,320 health, and your heavy attacks to restore 3,960 health to you or a nearby ally for 20 seconds. So this, to me, is a lot more options to it for the tank. Also, for the morph, I could take Green Lotus, which grants weapon critical, or I can caster can gain spell critical. Once again, this is kind of depending if you're going more stand-based or if you're going to go more magicka-based. I'm a red guard, but I'm using a lot of magicka-based abilities, so I'm going to go with the Lotus Blossom. Okay, so now we've unlocked a lot of our skills, but where do we go from here? How do we put it all together? Well, the first thing I want to go ahead and do is just get into the gear, and I'm just going to pick up something here. So, we're going to take the automated defense, and let me go into the dungeon gear, see what they got for the tanks here at the moment. They could go with the rattle cage. Might have to at the moment. Let me see what the overland sets are. Oh, perfect. Plague Doctor. I'll take that. Okay, and another thing I want to also do is look at the monster sets, because one of the major monster sets that's definitely going to come in play here. Now, you could take a lot of monster set, guys, and let's go over this. Grothar, I'm not going to really use much, right? Chokethorns is healing, but Ice Heart for the Warden, any type of magicka-based Warden, just is a kill set. It's such a kill set. Lamberts, no. Krogs, no. Selene's, maybe PvP. Skeletrex, Sentinel. It has its usefulness. Shadowrun, Slam Crow, Stormfist, no. Thermoscale, you know, that definitely could be nice. And Troll King. So, they didn't give you everything. Oh, that's what I was looking for. Infernal Guardian. That's the one I'm looking for, too. So, let's go over Infernal Guardian here for a second. Okay, Max Magicka. When you use a damage shield ability, you have a 50% chance to lob 3 mortars over 2 seconds to the first enemy. That deals 5,308 flame damage to all enemies within 5 meters. This can happen every 6 seconds. A lot of people use this for PvP. But for PvE, if you're on top of it, what it does is cause an AoE effect. Right? So you gather everything up, you pop your shield ability. All of a sudden, it's putting an AoE effect on top of all of those targets. right? And since we're using a lot of magic ability, we're going to get max magicka for the one-piece set. So this is definitely a badass set for a tank, hands down. Also, Ice Heart. Once again, it's going to give a spell critical. Now, if you're going to use the set on the Warden as a tank, what I would suggest you go ahead and do is actually pick up a hybrid type build, right? If you're going to run a hybrid. Because you have to deal critical damage, and then you have a 20% chance to gain a damage shield that absorbs 8,300 damage. Now, that's the kind of nice thing. If you take a crit set and you bump up your spell critical, you're going to lose some mitigation, but you're going to gain it with the absorption shield. But it's only for 8,300, but applies every 6 seconds. But while the damage shield holds, you deal 787 frost damage to all nearby enemies within 5 meters of you every second. This can occur every 6 seconds. So it's kind of nice. But I definitely think I'm going to go with more of the Infernal Guardian set. So I'll probably take shoulders and the head, and of course you can glyph accordingly. But automated defense, really nice set. All right. Oh, I think I'm full here. Okay, yeah. So the first thing I always like to do is I always usually, same thing. I go with an axe, sword, or whatever. But there's a sword, and there's my shield. Now I'm just going to switch it up. So now I'm going to use the Plague Doctors instead of the automated, or Plague Doctor sword. And then I'll go automated. So I'm keeping the bonuses on the switch. Okay, we're going to go with the Infernal Guardian. Alright. Obviously, we're going to be using this set. Now we can go with the Plague Doctor. Now I only need one of those. That should be 5. Yep. And that should be 5. Now, the nice thing about tanks, you can go with a double stack with a monster set since you're going sword and board, and you won't ever get a drop. It's kind of really nice. A really nice setup here. So when we take a look at our skills, since we're running sword and board, now if you wanted to go resto staff, you could. If you want to go dual wield with hybrid, you can. There's a lot of options with the tanks. So you definitely want to keep your options open depending on the scenario, and by unlocking all these extra skills and passives, that'll give you your flexibility. So one of the major things that I'm always taking a look at when it comes to any tank is my taunts. So I want to go ahead and put this here. Speaking of taunts, I always want to go into the Undaunted too, and I want to pick up Inner Fire most of the time. Now Inner Fire becomes very important, and let's go over this. Because it ignites the fires of hate in an enemy's heart, dealing 1,283 magic damage and forcing them to attack you for 15 seconds. Grants 15% chance that the allies targeting this enemy can activate Radiant Synergy, dealing 992 magic damage to a target enemy over 2 seconds and causing the target to explode for 2,917 magic damage to all nearby enemies. And it's really nice. It's a nice taunt. The one thing it lacks is Major Fracture, Major Breach. But you can also morph it and increase the chance to create a synergy for Magicka. Or you can convert it into a stamina ability if you're more stamina based. Now, since I'm using Magicka, I'm going to go ahead and opt for the Inner Rage. Most of my tanks, run Magicka and stamina. I usually keep that kind of option. But I'll usually keep this on my back bar for a range taunt. So I have my close-in quarter taunt that gives Major Fracture, Major Breach, increasing my DPS, and then I have my range taunt. So that's how I usually set it up. Also, you can go with Bone Shield. This is really nice because what it does is surround yourself with a whirlwind of bones, absorbing damage equivalent to 30% of what? Once again, my max health. Allies can activate a bone wall synergy, absorbing damage allies equal to 60% of their max health. The wall lasts for 10 seconds. And then, of course, you have your Spike Bone Shield, return damage to melee attackers, which works great for PvP and hybrid builds. Or Bone Surge, synergy increases ally healing received. And usually for dungeon crawls, I'll go with Bone Surge. Okay, but I'm not always slotting that. It depends. But I'll usually have it unlocked. Okay, so we have our taunts, right, guys? The major thing that we want to go ahead and do now is we're going to run up the heroic slash on 1 bar. So I'm going to use, since I'm magicka based, these are only going to be my only 2 stamina based abilities in this whole thing. Now later on, if I want to put the absorb magic or something, I can do that. But next thing I want to go ahead and do is come over here. Now, what I like to do typically is if I'm running a magicka side, I want to take advantage of maximizing my magicka and increasing any other effects. So I'll put Northern Storm on the back. Over here, I'm always going to put my main mitigating effect, which is Ice Fortress, and I'll usually put that somewhere in the back end, which comes in handy. Now, over here, I got Gripping Shards. So Gripping Shards will give me my AoE effect, and it's based off my max health. So what I typically like to do is just like say, okay, well, this is going to be kind of like my DPS CC end. So I'm going to put it on my back bar, typically. Now, my Polar Wind, once again, this is kind of, you know, an effect that I might be using, you know, in between. And, of course, since I have this, I need a shield effect for the Infernal Guardian. So I'm going to take the Shimmering Shield, and that's going to get slotted over here. So here's all kind of my main abilities kind of slotted. But the one thing I also want to take a look at here, remember, we have the Betty. So I want to go up here and I want to put a Betty into a utility area. And then I might be using Lotus Blossom because remember, what it does is my light attacks are going to restore health and my heavy attacks are going to restore health not only to me, but to allies as well. So I'm most likely definitely going to slot this as well. So I might be putting something like that here or whatever. And if I want now, I can also go ahead and put like Inner Light to gain up more max magicka or something on this end to get a bigger, you know, any type of other effect from Inner Rage or something. But most of the time, this is where I'll take another absorption effect from my shield. So if I want to, I'll put my absorb magic here. Or if I wanted to, I could put it here on my main, increasing my block. And then coming back on this end, I'll replace my shield effect. And then I'll come in and go back to the green balance. And I'll put my blossoms over here. Now I got my Northern Storm. And now in my Warhorn for my ultimates. Now there's a lot of options once again to tank. Now if most of the time on tanks I'll use tri-statted food, right? So let's go into supplies. Now mind you, I do not have a Mundus yet or anything like that, but I can go over here and go to the food crate. Trying to find it. Been a while, guys. Consumables. Okay. So most of the time I prefer using a tri-statted food. Okay. So without anything else applied, that's kind of where I'm looking at. Now I can also go ahead and pick up different effects for different regions, my Mundus, and the stamina is going to come in handy. And as you guys can see, I put more into the magicka, but since I'm Redguard, I automatically get the max stamina. Now this will change depending on each race as well. But this is kind of really a nice setup. I try to push up towards the 40k max health and then adjust accordingly. And then I'll just go ahead and, you know, pick up Munduses and make the alterations as necessary. But that's not bad. It's definitely not bad. So we have all of our mitigating effects. And if we take a look, our base mitigation is 17,472, 17,109. And when we hit our mitigating effect, now we're at 2222. Right? And, keep in mind also, guys, we have self-heals going on with the Lotus Blossom, right? So, and then we have our regen with our Blue Betty. We also have our shield for an absorption. We also have a backup absorption effect, which also gives us a cost reduction for block. Also, we have our minor MAME, and we also are getting the major heroism and minor heroism, which is going to help with ultimate regen, and it's going to go apply mainly to our aggressive Warhorn. But if we need to in mob control, we can run up the Northern Storm. We have our range taunt, we have a close-in taunt, major fracture, major breach, and all of this is applying. We have our CC effect. So this is kind of the layout I would typically go with. Now, let's say if I didn't want to go with the Absorb Magic, I could actually then opt for another stacking effect with the Undaunted, and then I can go with the Bone Surge. Okay? So it definitely comes in handy to have your options, guys. So keep that in mind. But pretty much that's about it. Now, when we're taking a look at champion points, this is all going to be relative too. So let's go ahead and go over this. Now, tanks champion distribution is all going to depend on build. But mostly, one of the major things I always go to is the Shadow Ward. I always want to reduce the cost of my blocks, and even if it's a few percentage. But most of the time, I bump this up to almost 12%. Tumbling, I roll out a lot between, not too much. So I'll reduce some of that damage as well. But major thing for me is splitting my recovery. Remember, guys, I'm going to be using a lot. So I'll usually put in, between this and with stamina, I'm blocking more. So I'll put in more into my stamina recovery. Okay, now also keep in mind, guys, I'm a tank. So health recovery becomes a very big issue as well. I'll usually get that up to 5%. Tenacity, I'm going to be doing a lot of blocking, but weaving in between. So with fully charged, I'll try to get that up to about 6% as well. Now when I come over here, it's all about my break free. I don't need anything else on here too much. And if I want to do a bash build, I can. That's more PvP, but PvE, it's more block. So it's going to go over here. And now I can put in more in my recoveries. That looks good. Let's get this up to about 945. Put a little bit more health in. And then, of course, more in the block. Now, we're not going to use sneak, so that's a little high even for me. I don't mind reduction, but that's a little crazy. Okay, that looks pretty good for me personally. I know I'm going to be running a heal, right? So I have a couple different healing effects. So I'll usually get up this just a little bit here. Now a Magicka base, depending on my sets, is how everything else is going to apply, typically. But a major thing that I like to do is, I know I'm going to be running like sword and boards and stuff. So I always focus on penetrations more than anything. And I know Warden has a lot of dot effects. So I'm going to be running up the thermiters just a little bit. But penetration becomes all of my fixation between the two. Now, I'm not going to be dealing a lot of damage. I might put a few points in, maybe like 3% or something like that. But the passives is where it is. Now, mind guys, last stand don't mean nothing because I'm already going to get major heroism. So that's not going to mean anything on this tank. So I like to, like I said, I like to focus in. Now, if I'm dealing more Magicka-based damage, I'm going to put more into the spell pen. But keep in mind, I'm going to be weaving with a physical weapon, so I need that pen as well. I have no pen, 0. So I'm usually going to focus in a little bit more on that. I know I'm going to deal a lot more magic damage with frost and stuff, so this is going to be a lot more focal point for me. I never put 100 points because of diminishing returns. Keep that in mind, guys. That looks pretty good. Masher at arms. We're going to deal some direct damage. And, of course, I have physical weapons. So we'll get that up there a little bit. Okay, the warrior tree. A lot of major things going on here, guys. So reduction, 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 reduction. Okay, depending if you need spell resistance. Usually I will split up into hardy and elemental defender before I'll pick up anything. I'll usually get this up to about 12% as a tank. Okay, my next focal point is quick recovery. I know I'm going to get healed. Why? Because I'm a tank. So I definitely always want to put in the healing received. I usually get this up to almost about 10%, maybe 12, depending. Okay, so we're going to go 10.8. Looks kind of good. Bastion, I have damaging effects. I have, damage shields. So I'm going to usually get this up to about 10 or 11, maybe 12. Now I want to come back over here. I want to reduce any type of damaging effects. So if there's any dot effects, reduce. Spell damage, reduce. Physical resistance, I can apply. Thick skin, once again, all these kind of apply. I usually go with ironclad, obviously. So I'll usually go between 8 and 9. And then usually what I like to do is go with, now if I'm PvPing, there's a whole different thing for that. And I go a heavy armor focus or something like that, or light, depending what I need. Okay? Nothing major. Now I want to go back in my character sheet. Now you guys can see the relevant difference. So now I'm up to 43,000. I'm up to 17k max magicka, and I'm at 1874 max stamina. So to me, this works out really well. Now that's on this bar. If I switch over to my other bar, you're going to see the difference because I have the Northern Storm, so my max magic is increased. But that's going to fluctuate between my bar swaps. So now if I wanted to bring this down, max health, I can drop this down to me probably another 1,000. I could go about 42. And I would be fine with that. And then bump up my stamina, maybe an equivalent. So I might drop 2 from my health, put 2 into my stamina. But to me, this is kind of where I like to look at for tanks. And then I glyph accordingly on my jewelry. Whether I need more magic recovery or stamina recovery, that'll be up to you. But usually I run recovery. So health recovery is a little high because I have self-heals. And I can imagine that's because the jewelry is glyphed with health recoveries. Yes. So I would take those out and then go with the more like stamina recovery. So my main focus then would be my stam recovery because I'm going to be blocking a lot more. So I'll probably get that up to about an extra 800, and I'll probably run either the steed, the serpent, or the atronach. So there it is, guys. And as you guys can see, I'm sitting at 20k resistance now. Sorry. All right. Now we're at almost 25, which is nice. Now also I want you guys to take a look at this. So when I throw up the Blue Betty, so now you're going to go ahead and see, I'm going to get that magicka regen. So I got this, and I got that. And I have another heal over here. Alright. But if you have any questions or comments, please post below. Once again, also keep in mind for gear. I don't like a lot of the trial sets for tanks up until Morrowind, but this new set is pretty badass, guys. So I would tell any tank, the automated defense is badass set. Because, to me, the ultimate 5th piece is really nice. I love the Luna. I did like the Luna. I just didn't like the 5th bonus. And to me, this is where this set kind of shines, because it's going to give them major ages. It's real for the ultimate. Now, that's why minor and major heroism come in play, because you're going to get that ultimate regen, and you're going to blow faster, and you're going to apply the major ages, reducing damage from my team a lot better. So this is a pretty solid setup. I like the Infernal Guardian for a tank. There's other options. You can run Bloodspawn. You can run the one from Maz. Tons of different sets for tanks, for further mitigation if need be. But yeah, guys, there it is. Also, Lord Warden, really good set. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. I do want to thank you all for watching, and once again, always, have a nice day.